Welcome to the 2-Month Review, the weekly podcast brought to you by Open Letter and 3%, in which we take a book or several, break them down bit by bit, section by section, analyze, talk about, discuss, have fun. I'm Chad Post from Open Letter Books, joined as always by my co-host Brian Wood, author of Joytime Killbox, and Kaya Straumanis, translator of High Tide and editor at Open Letter.
What's up?
Hi, Chad. Are we live or are scheduled to go live?
We are live.
Wow, this is amazing.
we are talking about Anne Quin's The Unmapped Country, the final book of our 5-book Anne Quin Odyssey.
We're also watching the downfall of Brian Wood with his homemade nog as he powers through the final pours.
Yeah, it gets me through the blizzard. Some cured egg yolks and booze. Yeah.
Nothing could go wrong there.
I want to tell you something.
No, Ellie, you cannot.
Full of calcium. Yeah, so,
Yep.
All right. I think we've read everything Anne Quin ever wrote by the end of this season.
I think so, too.
How do you guys feel? Do you wish there was more?
I feel smarter and better, but satisfied at the same time. I feel good.
I like having reread all of these after so long and remembering like kind of what the sort of excitement was when I first discovered her, and also sort of lament the fact that there aren't a lot of people working like this anymore. I think there are more than I know of, and I think there are more British and American female writers that are writing more edgy or interesting or structurally and stylistically unconventional books that I just haven't been exposed to yet. So it's kind of like a disappointment not to know them. Excited because I think there is that these being reissued actually does point to like a contemporary tradition that we may have writers of this sort. And Anne Quin was something else. Makes you want to reread B.S. Johnson, those two, like and some of these other like experimental mid-century British writers that were doing weird shit. I wish I had more time.
Which one was your guys, since you guys wrote all of it, or all of the things that you assigned, which was your favorite? Or I don't know if ranking them was fair, or just what's at the top and what's at the bottom of the Quin totem pole for you?
I think for me, where I could see, like, I don't want to say like fully developed. That's kind of a weird, but I don't know, like in one of the essays story talks about getting the tone right, or like trying to rewrite to get the tone correct. And I felt for me where like, she was like, I could see every bit of like the evolution of Quin, and like where it starts to just like hit on every note was the longer story in here, The Unmapped Country. I thought like, for me, it was just like pitch perfect, weird, edgy, just enough, but also like spoon feeding you mashed potatoes at the same time. It's really easy to get. And like the narrative of it makes total sense and is really easy. And like, I thought it was just like fully formed, fully rendered, like great Anne Quin was the Unmapped Country for me.
But without sacrificing any of the dissociative weirdness of the earlier.
Because I like the weirdness, but sometimes it comes at a, like you lose something for some readers if it's really hard to get or maybe too fragmented. And then if for lack of a better term, if you just write like a basic bitch novel, like people feel like you're losing something there too. Like where's like, I want something to like wrestle with. I want something hard. And I feel like Unmapped Country did a wonderful job, like balancing that scale of being difficult, but also being very approachable.
Yeah. What about you, Chad?
I don't know. I think my least favorite was always passages, but I think our conversations about that opened that up in a way that made it really, and I went back. I come up with my crazy theory during that one of like the being one character that's bifurcated in the Artie Lang stuff. I went back and I read some criticism stuff, and that showed up in there, like almost verbatim. Not exactly what I said, but like similar, like pointing around that idea, along with the idea that passages could also be read as a book that is just passages of different books that could be written, as if they were like excerpts. So there's like the spy novel part of it. There's like the sex part of it. There's like all these different things that are kind of like pieces of other books. So I like that more than I did before. And I'd have to say, actually, like, I think maybe my least favorite was Bird, because it was the most straightforward and like least challenging. And I really liked Triptychs because I think it's so funny, like just funny. And then 3, I think still is like has a warm spot in my heart for like it being the first one that I really like read and got into. But I know what you mean, Brian, about the Unmapped Country, which we were talking about this last night, is that it came out after One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and after B.S. Johnson's House Mother Normal, both of which I think are like foundations for the sort of like, and Shudder of Snow, but she wouldn't have necessarily known that, and it's not as quite as relevant. But those two that are from like the late 50s, early 60s, late 60s, before either way, like recent contemporary with this coming out, really laid the groundwork for this sort of like readerly approach and writerly approach in which you're able to like say something horrifying about mental health and about the treatment of mental health patients, but in a way that's also like funny. Or like I found it very funny. I think Kaya, you were like not funny at all.
No.
Oh, okay.
I didn't find it funny at all, because Chad, you were saying you're like the first 20-30 pages are hilarious, and then it goes into like the retro, like the second part explains a lot of the first part again, like a lot of her other things that we've read. It's this, I think, very subtle exposition, but I was really anxious for the narrator, for Sandra, the entire time. You know, like there's this other kid who, Sandra, this kid who isn't talking, and he keeps trying to like pull her into dark places and kiss her, or he's like showing her, he's like, he tries the like dick in a box chocolate trick or something, like and it makes her nauseous. So like I was really worried that she was there because she had been raped, sexually assaulted, and it was kind of like like one of those, you know, don't believe the accuser type of situations. And I was very uncomfortable until you get to the second part, and it's very much a like overly spiritualized God experience, and like following these old men around because she's seen God in the wall, and that dictates her entire day. And I thought that was, I mean, beautiful. And it does take the anxiety away of it degenders the experience in the first part, I think. Or not, it doesn't degender it, but it degenders the sort of hysteria or the madness of it. But yeah, I did not find it particularly funny at the beginning. But I will say, so I read the beginning and the end of this collection of stories. I didn't read the middle 3 by Chad's recommendation, but after I finished Unmapped Country last night, Chad was like, "What did you think?" And I said, I liked it. I thought it was really good. And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, I don't want to talk about it right now. I want to go back and read as much as I can of the beginning of the book before I pass out, because it's freaking amazing. It's so, all of the book is so good. And I think some of the things both of you have pointed out about it, and about the way Anne Quin writes, it's just, this is a magnificent collection of tidbits.
Yeah, we can talk about some of the earlier pieces in a second. The part like the banter that I think is so funny. I mean, it's just like, it's so funny. Like on 161 when she's talking to Thomas, and he's like, "You believe me, don't you? Even if no one else does, you do, don't you?" He said, catching hold of her arm. "You believe that I'm Judas Iscariot reincarnated? I have positive proof. The evidence is all in my book. At least it will be when I've written it. And God is Mrs. Carr, and my friend Bob is Jesus Christ." What are you going to call your book, Thomas? God's joke. And then later on, another God joke is on 172 when she's like, he had visions, a God, talking about Blake, William Blake, had visions, a God who laughed, belched, snorted, and picked his nose. Her God had been straight out of Blake, long snowy beard and snowy locks, and in his face every conceivable landscape. That's a funny face, Sandra. It's God. Looks like a lump of shit to me. These are fun bits.
I could like going back and after reading the second part and sort of understanding, or not understanding, but getting a better idea of the source of her madness and the progression of the madness. I love on 191 where she's like, how can you say Annie Carr is God, Thomas? I mean, look at her. Just look at her. She's like, this is the woman who's like dipping her nipples in gravy and like taking off her nightie and stuff like that.
There's also, I mean, I love we could talk more about the Artie Lang aspects of some of this, but I also love the simple line of I mean, when she's talking about how they believe that the therapist is human. I know that the therapist is human. I know because he farted today. Like, I mean, when you hear a fart and smell a fart, then you know a man's a man and he's human. this is good life. This is a good life lesson.
For me, the best part in Unmapped Country, well, not the best part, but the best part is on 175, where they're in their sessions together and goes, I have a poem here I'd like to read. It's called The Trees Aching Green. When the trees move, we don't want to hear any of your crappy poems. When the trees begin to walk, I want to know when I can go home. Naked, I stand in the roof. Imagine him naked. Ah! All the patients laugh.
Which, incidentally, Universal Connection, it goes back. Chad and I just watched I Heart Huckabees a couple nights ago, and that's what Jason Schwartzman's character is always like. I wrote a poem, and they're like, fuck off. Like, this isn't going to solve anything.
Your poems aren't going to save the forest. My poem saved this rock. Have you seen that movie, Brian? I forgot how great that movie actually is.
No, is that by that director, something O. Russell?
David O. Russell, yeah. I was talking about how the first movie I saw in college.
He's hashtag canceled to me, so I can't watch his stuff. So
why did he get canceled?
No, he's always been like a monster on set, apparently.
He yells at everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, he's like a total enfant terrible.
I love it. I love it. The first date I went on in college was to see Spanking the Monkey, which I had no idea what it was.
It was like I haven't seen that one. My first with him was Three Kings, I think.
This incest movie where one of the great lines is when he gets on the phone when his dad's talking to his mom. He gets on the phone and he says, Dad, I fucked your wife. I'm going to fuck her again. And I liked it. And I was like, well, this date's not going to end well. This is not what I think anyone was looking forward to. But then he made I Heart Huckabees great. Three Kings great. We watched the new one, Amsterdam, it's fine. But also Anchorman, the fuck?
That was him?
Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea.
Me neither.
Interesting.
Me neither. Anyways. But yeah, the banter and the comedy parts of it, I think, benefit from the film version of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Like you see it less as tragedy and more as like almost like bit parts. And that's where the B.S. Johnson book they always reference, House Mother Normal, it's set in like old folks home / mental care facility, is also funny in that way where people say weird shit and like they are kind of like goofy and unhinged, but it's like they are tragic, their lives are tragic, and yet like they're not pitied. Like the book doesn't pity them, the voice doesn't pity them or like diminish them. And that's kind of like part of the Artie Lang thing too, where he's like, everyone's schizophrenic and everything's a mess, the world's a mess, it's not just you. And this is like something I've been reading a lot about recently, of like disease not being an on-off thing but a continual thing. And like in the same way that Artie Lang is like, madness is just all there, you're all mad, we're all mad, it's just different ways that society treats you based on your variation of madness. And that should be examined. And I think the book sort of does that. And wonder like too, like this one seems like the most personal and yet like and straightforward in some ways, like for her life. I mean, there's so many other parts where like the stuff about her dad wanting to kill her dad, all those things that were from her life that show up in those other novels, and yet this one feels like the most like, yeah, this is my mental health journey.
Yeah, like I think that was like part of the power of it. One thing I find interesting now that we're kind of like looking back at everything we've read for this season is I keep seeing this like repetition of like Burroughs and B.S. Johnson, and then there's like that pillar, and then there's this pillar of Kathy Acker and Chris Kraus, and then there's the bridge, and like and Quin being the bridge between these two pillars. And it's like, why isn't she just like a pillar on her own, like in between there somewhere?
And I think that the other, I think B.S. Johnson is too contemporary to really be, like, I could see how she brought literature's potentialities to Chris Kraus and Kathy Acker. Like that they mined similar sorts of things that she was mining, but she was the precursor to them. I mean, Chris Kraus is still alive, so, you know, ongoing. But I think the other one is like Virginia Woolf, actually, and the interiority of the Virginia Woolf fragmented female subjectivity, I think, is the other column. She's in between those two. Not that she's not a column on her own, but that she's not quite the Virginia Woolf because she doesn't have the realism of manners that was part of that modernist period and that time of British writing. And she's not really Kathy Acker because she's not like the vulgar, outspoken. She's still trying to find her voice or find the scream, find the way to like break things a little bit. And Kathy Acker comes in a world that shit's already happened enough that, I mean, although they aren't that far apart. I mean, Blood and Guts in High School came out in 1975, did it not?
Sure, sounds good. I don't know. I don't know.
Let's find out. This is not a game I am good at. But I feel like it was somewhere over 85.
The other thing that I find interesting too 76. Is I wonder 76.
It was finished in 78, published in 84.
Okay. I'm curious with Anne Quin, if she had had a longer career and put out more work, how would she be viewed versus having, you know, such a bright, explosive, quick career?
I wonder if this was supposed to be, UNMAPPED Country was supposed to be her next book. It does have a veer to it. Like it doesn't have quite as foregrounded experimentation style the way that like Passages did. And Triptychs is kind of its own thing, separate from the others in terms of like the approach and the like various techniques that she uses. So if this is like the roadmap, towards like what her future would have been, I wonder if she would have become less like jagged and more nuanced and powerful in the way that she could have written about some of these things without having to be like the avant-garde spokesperson. I mean, British literature gets all fucked up after this though too. So so she would have been writing in the Thatcher years, which would have been like both like really probably like would have suited her in terms of like the dirtiness and the unconventionality and immorality of like the characters and the sort of aesthetic behind it. But at the same time, the Thatcher era was fucking bad for a lot of these people. And for people like her, it would have been probably really horrible.
I thought it would be very fruitful for her, because if you think of like having this kind of, I don't know, almost like a experimental, pushing the boundaries, at the same time kind of like a Marxist, like kind of.
I mean, not in like a physical way.
Yeah. But I could see it being very fruitful for where she'd want to go creatively and pushing back. I mean, it's kind of like how great I feel like Reagan was great for artists in America, because there's like this anti-Pepsi, you know, like anti-commercialism wave that takes place in the 80s and 90s that's coming out of Reaganomics. I thought it'd be really interesting to see what she would have done in this like, runaway train of just.
It would have been great.
Saw what she did. You saw what she did with her American road trip. I can only imagine what she'd do after the Thatcher or during the Thatcher years.
Yeah, I'm thinking more of like even in America with the Reagan stuff, like the artists got all their funding cut from the NEA. The NEA is never is the same budget it was in 1984 as a result. It doesn't keep up with inflation. The Arts Council would never have funded her as part of the Thatcher years. So like all like the sort of like social network.
She already jokes about it, like, I got funded once. I probably read it. I'm never going to get funded again. I love that. I love those parts of it. Yeah.
She would have been like that. That's the part that I work at. Because I know Calder was on like a no-fly list because of his outspokenness against Thatcher. Like all these people are like, you know, it was weird. Like it was weird shit. Like it was a culture war. The culture wars were a real thing that was like physically a war against us as well, and against people, forcing them into poverty and into bad situations. So as someone who's like already a little unstable and a drug addict and like not in the best of places. Thatcher years could have been good aesthetically and mentally breaking in some ways too. But I don't know. Maybe she would have like written one big ass gigantic novel that would have been like the namesake. Because none of these have like if you were to say, if someone were to say to you guys like okay, so I've heard that you guys talked about Anne Quin, you've read all the books. Which one book of hers is like the intro, the one that's like the masterpiece of hers that is the one that everyone should read and that would stand out? There really isn't one, is there?
I would say no, but I could be in the minority.
I would say no too. And I wonder if that's like one of those things that as you write longer, you get that either through like retrospectively making something your masterpiece or reaching a different level in which it's clear that this is the next evolution, the next phase. I don't know.
In some ways, not to do like a clumsy sports analogy, but it almost like feels like that kind of she's like in that what if territory where like, wow, there's a lot of promise here. What if like she continued? It's like Bo Jackson with football or something. If he wasn't injured, he would have broken every record and been the most like, well, he didn't. So he's a footnote and he's good to tell stories about him. Like, wow, that was
you see those highlights and it's just like, I remember him getting injured and watching that live and being like, well, that's the end of this really magical moment.
Well, I think with Anne Quin, it's almost kind of, I like the shorter career in that you play those what if games, but it's just like, wow, this was like a great amount of work in a short amount of time, and she's never going to be really big and she's never going to be really famous, and that's super cool and super okay, because it's kind of fun to like have this, you don't know about Anne Quin? Oh, you should check Anne Quin out. She was doing that 40 years before anybody did this. Are you serious? So yeah, I don't know. Like, I think the legend will continue because of that. Whereas if maybe she had a more extended career, it could just kind of be a more forgetful canonical writer that's kind of like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, so she dies in 73, right? Yeah. So her entire career
at the ripe age of 37.
37. What an old hag. 37.
Yeah, old hag.
Go swim in a river.
Perimenopause.
So low.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Berg came out in 64. She dies in 73. So that's like 9 years.
It's bonkers.
4 novels, some short stories, this uncompleted thing. It's a lot, but it's not excessive because none of the books are like 600 pages. This isn't like Joyce Carol, but it is interesting that.
But the works are like, they're deep, they're layered, they're textured. It takes time to write like that. I get it. Like she's just not shaking it out super fast. But I mean, that's a really productive decade.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that she did some ghostwriting too, because I think it was that one of the stories in here was taken from was it the Australian or the New Zealand pop star that she had ghost written for him?
Oh, something Apple, was it?
I think so, yeah. And so that makes me wonder, how many other possibilities are there out there that, did she do more of this ghostwriting? Is there other stuff that, all the players involved are in the great beyond and have passed on, and we can't double check that? But
BB's second manifesto, ghost written for Billy Apple in around 1962.
Yeah. That was her partner at the time, who's like one of those like pop. I think that I looked it up at the beginning of this. Now I can't remember the details, but I think he was like in Manhattan and doing like kind of the Warhol-esque pop art style of things at that time. That the BB's second manifesto is one of the pieces I think in here is brilliant. Like voice driven, super funny, super like capturing that sort of artiste. So good.
Well, what'd you like about it?
Like one of the best, I think one of my favorite lines is, Christ, they're so mass consumed they can't even shit straight. Was one of them. Like the sort of anger as like a artist and like sort of dismissive of other things and of other people and other movements, and also like sort of aware of the facade of one's own sort of posturing. That's what I feel like gets captured here in a way that's like different than the male from Triptychs, and a different version of like undercutting like the male narrative, and in a way that's like that is unique. And the fact that it was ghostwritten is one thing, but like it really feels like a different person, a different character, a different voice. The same thing, the other one that I think is really good is Motherlog, where the mom calls on the telephone and you just hear the mom's side of the conversation. That too, I think, is good at like character creation of like that sort of like runaway voice.
Yeah, the voice is pretty funny in BB's Second Manifesto. I love the well, this guy climbed out on my windowsill and squatted there reading poetry to me all day long till I let him in and we went to bed together. No, I'm not queer, okay? So I fucked a few fellows, but I'm not gay. Yeah, I know. Like it's like beat, like this beat generation of like, and then knowing how much she hated like On the Road at the same time, and like kind of like the beats and this like pop art stuff while making fun of it at the same time. Or now Mailer, he could get away with that. Otherwise, unless you're a genius, it's just hard work.
Yeah, perhaps I'm a commie. I don't dig Marx though. At least I'm not a national fascist and all that jazz. But I rather like the idea of sharing. A few people working for me. It is that like contradictory nature of art of artists, of like, oh, I've got this pure look and I'm also like kind of a shit bag.
Like you're here but you don't want to be here.
Yeah.
Just that last line, Jesus, I'm getting out.
Well, that's what Motherlog does too, of like the Motherlog reminded me a lot of the tone in oh my god, what's the author's name? The book is called what is it? The book is called My Phantoms. And it was released, it's a UK book, and that was a UK writer that was recently released through New York Review Books. Oh god, what is her name? It's going to come to me. Gwendolyn Riley. Gwendolyn Riley writes, there's two books of hers that have been published by NYRB. One's like about a dysfunctional husband-wife relationship, and the second is about a dysfunctional relationship between a daughter and her parents, in particular her mother. And there's a lot of this Motherlog kind of vibe in that book, both like the crispness of it, the sort of like stating things with like a subtext that you catch, but you don't have to like really nail down that hard, and like this kind of like dismissiveness and like tension that exists in like that sort of relationship that's never fully and directly addressed. That comes up a lot. Like it reminded me a lot of that book as I was reading it in like a very positive way. Yep.
That's good shit for you.
And Quinn.
I actually think, Brian, you could weigh in on this, but I actually think this would be a really great book of hers to use in any sort of MFA creative writing intro course, just because there are all the different tones and voices, but it is still very much true to Anne Quin, even the ghost written one. And I actually think the first story, The Nude and Seascape, after reading that, I was like, God, this sounds like something I would have wanted to write in college, where you like have this, beautiful but macabre imagery, and then kind of halfway through, you're like, he's not just like dragging this corpse around the beach, is he? Oh God, he is. He is. But then you don't get that reveal until the very end. It does sound something that I would have loved to have written or attempted to write in college in my creative writing courses. And then even A Double Room, where you have this relationship with this older man, younger woman, and the emotional back and forth, at the beginning, she doesn't really want to be doing it. She's kind of regretting it. And at the end, she's like, oh, but wait, like, I could be wrong, but is this something that you think that your students could and I'm giving your students a lot of benefit of the doubt, students across the world. Do you think it's something that writing courses could benefit from?
Absolutely not. I don't want
And
any
disconnecting myself.
no, I think it's fantastic and it's great, but I don't want them to read it because I'm sick and tired of getting stories that have some sort of trick. People think you have to have a trick ending or some surprise in a story, and I just want them to like have a simple sentence and a character that wants something and like make me feel that want. Like that's like all I'm trying to do, and like it's always about, oh, little did they know they were a ghost. Like they want to do like the Sixth Sense, or they're trying to do an O. Henry story or something.
M. Night Shyamalan's influence.
Like, oh God,
How's
please
that
don't
fucker
stop.
making movies? Like this is a problem. Like for our culture, that guy keeps making terrible movies, and over and over again, he's infecting people.
I know, like I don't wish ill will on anybody, but imagine if he drowned right after he made his second movie. We'd be saying, wow, he was a great director. Think of what he could have been between Sixth Sense and Unbreakable. Yeah, but no, he had to just keep going on and have Mel Gibson and aliens
every like 3 months. And everyone's like panned worse than the last. It's like no.
Yeah.
The one where he comes back to like the grounding of the Sixth Sense and like really has no, give up, man. Cut your losses, Universal. Just cut your losses. Man's doing fine. We don't need him.
No, I think this would be great for like like at master's level. I think it would be a wonderful book to give people, especially with how like fluid and plastic it can be, but still kind of be knit together. It's cool.
I forgot how funny that story that you referenced, the one with the older man, because I read most of this like when we first started. I read a bunch of the short stories just to see like the autobiographical ones, like leaving school. And some of those others, and that double room one is so funny because it is such a like, again, it like her like war against the male narrative from the jump is like of her career is spot on and like really good without being like strident and without being like where you're just like, oh, that's just like a parody or a caricature. It's like, no, it all feels a little real. That all tracks. Big ballpoint pens, grill with my bourbon and my barbecue and my gun. Was the triptychs one. There was something I was going to ask you, Brian, though, related. I was going to tell you. I had a dream that I had to teach at RIT, and the RIT was this crazy experimental institution where you didn't know where your class was. You just went and found a classroom and attended whatever you came to. So like anyone could be in any class. They could be in a physics class. They could be in a translate. They could be in anything, no idea. And you got paid $37 for each time you taught a class.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So I was like, where's my class? They're like, we don't have rooms. Just go find a room and teach whoever's in there.
Yeah. Sounds about right. That works. I like that. That tracks. You already get plenty of emails about, how anxious the students are and stuff. I can only imagine like I don't know how to translate, so this is causing me a lot of anxiety, so you need to pass me or give me something to help, please. Like I can only imagine if that was the way it worked. Yeah.
What class am I in today?
Yeah.
I didn't prepare.
I even tell people at the beginning of the semester, I don't care. Like, you don't have to send me any emails if you don't show up to class. I don't care. Like, show up, don't show up. And they still, I had a hard time sleeping last night, and I took some melanins, and then I overslept, and it's like, now I have to respond to this. I don't care. Like, just don't come. I don't care. Why do you have to communicate?
Oh my God.
Now, if they could only write stories the way they write their emails.
I know. Now I have to read all this. Now I have to work. Are you serious? No, it's great. It's great. Children are our future. I love teaching them. I think Quin is horribly undertaught, and I can understand why, because she'd be hard to teach. I mean, there's a reason you let's do Virginia Woolf, and then we'll do a little bit of Sylvia Plath, and then we'll move on to Kathy. Like that's easier, I think. And so this would be a lot harder.
Yeah, but easier because there's more material?
I think easier in the same way, like when you're teaching short stories, why do you read like Chekhov and Cheever and Carver, like names that end with C? I don't know, they're just easier to teach a lesson, and like how to write or how to read. Well, that too. Or Flannery O'Connor, like you read all the Flannery O'Connor stuff, and it's just they serve it up like it's like just nice and easy to dissect it and to have people see the ingredients and how the dish is made. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Ann Quin, it'd be a lot more. It's a lot more difficult. It'd be really hard it'd be a lot of work. And at the end of the day, professors don't have time to do a lot of work unless they're doing like a really specialized class, right?
Yeah. So is Ann Quin is less of one of those like prepared meals and more of one of those $10 grab bags you see by the self-checkout aisle where it's like you might get rice roti, you might get half a chicken.
Yeah. No, because like even like with me, like there's certain stuff I would love to put on the curriculum and teach, but like the amount of work and the amount of time it's going to take up, like it just doesn't work with the schedule, unfortunately. And like if you want to teach Ann Quin, it's going to take a few weeks, like easily. And you know, you're eating, unless you're making like a very specialized class that's experimental feminist literature, or I don't know what the class would be necessarily, but like, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think
a sweatshirt for that.
Yeah.
No, really, are you wearing it right now? Yeah.
I'm wearing my Riff Raff sweatshirt.
Experimental literature. There you go. Right on. You just need to put feminist on the top of it. There you go. Feminist.
Yeah. Yeah, Tom. Yeah, Roberge. Why didn't you think of that one? You're all into experimental literature. Don't include feminist? Come on, man.
Yeah. Hashtag cancel Tom. What the hell? Yeah.
Cancel Tom. Cancel Riff Raff. My class I teach in the spring, I never read the books before I teach them. With rare exception. I don't know.
The funny was like, so I had one class in grad school where we did a little bit of Kathy Acker, and it completely ripped the classroom apart, which I thought was awesome.
We did it. We killed everyone. There was me and one other person who everyone else was appalled.
Yeah, I think it's great to have a book that just rips people apart like that. Like,
yeah.
I heard one director, I don't know, he has a weird Scandinavian name, so I can't pronounce it appropriately. But no. Yeah, that was super hard to pronounce. But it's the director of Drive.
Oh yeah.
The stupid movie that's responsible for all of the vaporwave music we have to listen to now. But he was saying, like, if you get half of your reviews are positive and half of your reviews like you've done a good piece of art. But if everybody likes it, you probably didn't push hard enough, and everybody hates it, you probably fucked something up. And so I think like Ann Quin would definitely be one of those, like, this shit's weird, I don't like this, or why is everybody like, this is stupid, what's the point of this, versus, wow, I love this. And like when Acker was taught, it completely just ripped the class apart. And there was some like, wow, this is really weird, I don't know if I like this or not. And people are like, this is disgusting. Why? This is absolutely filthy and disgusting. Yeah, like I don't even think you could teach that now. Like it would just absolutely trigger and explode everybody. Like you read work like that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the content warnings would be a book in itself.
That'd be its own like dissertation to start it off. But
yeah, we didn't.
But yeah, I really appreciate Ann Quin because it does have that like rip apart quality where it's going to turn people off. It's going to upset some people. Others are going to like it. Some are going to be absolutely confused and dumbfounded and not know what to do with it, which is probably where I ended up being. But I think it's great. I love work like that because everything is so packaged and nice and neat and siloed now. It's really nice to find stuff like this where it's difficult and weird and I don't know, like who to recommend this to, but yeah, check it out. You'll probably hate it. Yeah.
Oh my God. I don't know. Is there anything else you want to say about her to wrap this season up? I'm looking at my books for my class next semester that are sitting here. Just at least one
I
of them
love it
is
because
that won't go over well. This will piss everyone off. I made it the last book of the class so that everyone can just not read it. And
my mom always asks, "What are you reading?" Or people ask me, "What are you reading?" Because as if like I have the hack of what's good to read or something. I'm always reading random stuff, and so it's like, oh, I'm reading, like experimental British literature by Quin. It's it's like very fiercely feminist and it's fun and avant-garde and confusing. And they're like, wow, that sounds terrible. So I like when people ask me what I'm reading and I tell them what I'm reading. And they're like, yeah, no thanks.
Who invited Brian?
I've been reading Blonde by Joyce Carol Oates for months now.
Did you watch the Netflix? Did you watch the Netflix?
I've started it at least 3 times. I've fallen asleep at least 3 times. I will at some point. But I want to kind of finish the book first, which is like 800 pages. It's really interesting. It's wonderful. Like it's so. I think Joyce Carol Oates is underrated in various ways because of her her prolific nature of her writing, and that as a female that's discounted more than it is for James Patterson, say. Like she is stylistically very interesting and structurally very interesting in the book. I don't know that much about Marilyn Monroe, to be honest. Like I would, if you had asked me before I started, I could have given you like 4 or 5 details and some general things. The one thing I'd forgotten about until yesterday was the picture of her reading Ulysses. And that's part of the book, is like how deep she was into like Chekhov and various other like playwrights and writers, and wasn't just like the sort of like stereotyping, but it's very interesting on how it tells a story and how it like deals with objectification and sort of the creation of these certain images within American culture at that time. Through the point where she just got divorced from quote unquote the ex-baseball player, aka Joe DiMaggio. But
did she read any Arthur Miller?
She is at the point where she's talking about Arthur Miller and loves Arthur Miller, but Arthur Miller's not named in the book. There's like various lacuna of names that don't exist because it's not a biography. It's a fiction about Marilyn Monroe. So there's certain things that are like elided, and Arthur Miller's next up. He's like the next chapter, I think.
She should have I'm excited dated Henry Miller. She dated Henry Miller. Would have been a different outcome, I think.
All the communist stuff, all that stuff. That part of Hollywood is really weird. I mean, it's very interesting. I don't know. That's big tangent. If you want to tell someone to read something that's not experimental literature, you can just plug that. Who doesn't like reading about Marilyn Monroe?
Well, you can always read the Family Circus collection. I think they're like 52 books. Or 100.
Family Circus. Family Circus is the worst cartoon that's ever existed, or one of them that was printed, that was syndicated so widely. Like because just they're being shitty on the big space on the page, being shitty every single day of the funny pages in the newspaper.
Yeah, I honestly try really hard not to like Joyce Carol Oates, just because like if I happen to be like really into her and like it, and then you go and see the amount of work she's put out, and you're like, oh shit! Like, I don't want to get into that. I don't want to like get into that. That's just like like there's so much other stuff I have to read and want to read, or I'm behind on. And I literally went to the library because I had to write a review of her for a magazine, and I went to the library to like, get a few different texts on her, and it was a shelf, an entire shelf and a half, or not a shelf, an entire bookcase and a half of just her work as you're going through the stacks. She's a stack and a half at the library with Joyce Carol. It's like, fuck me, I can't. How about this one short story she wrote? Let's do that. Okay, yeah.
There is that one, but I think her when I was in college, I read her short story collections and fucking loved them. It was like the last time I really loved reading short story collections because they were structured in such a specific way. Like Heat is the one that I remember the best, of like how it like evolved as a theme and becomes more crazy as it goes along. I don't know. This is really getting off of Anne Quin into like a wholly different world. But I think she's Simenon is a Belgian writer that wrote like 700 novels, and everyone's like, he's amazing, he's the greatest, he's fun, blah, 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 he's wonderful, wrote all these books, so they keep retranslating them and reissuing all these mysteries, but they will never do that for her.
This is why after reading Knausgaard's A Time for Everything, I stopped.
Perfect.
That's all. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was an amazing book. I don't want to know anymore.
Just like Anne Quin, hit it and quit it.
You don't want to do the Ali Smith / Knausgaard seasons reading tour. They both wrote 4 books one about each season, and they came out within the past couple of years. I'm kind of tempted to read both of them.
I'm going to say no.
That's okay.
Going back on track, I want to point out
a cool reading series of his 12 novels that are about each part of the spring, summer, winter, fall of a man's life. Do all the seasons together. And then we could drink all those beers again that were from Bell's Planets.
God, it's awful.
We didn't mention, but in our other podcast that no longer exists, weren't you Sandra?
Yeah.
The second that came up as the name in this book, I was like, oh, that's perfect. That's perfect.
And of course, because it's British, it's not going to be Sandra. It's going to be Sandra, I'm pretty sure. So I only read it as Sandra. But back on topic real quick, I wanted to point out the notes on sources at the end is that whoever, I don't know if it's supposed to be the person who wrote the introduction. It was supposed to be Jennifer Hodgson or editors at End Other Stories, but they say, I've corrected spelling, grammatical, and typographical errors where they weren't intended stylistically, which I found very interesting because in some of the other ones, all those widows and orphans.
How do you know?
I'm reading another British book by another prominent British publisher, and British publishers are bad at layouts and bad at proofreading. Come at me.
Maybe that's why they put that in the notes.
It's there.
That's why they put it in the notes. They're like, oh, we did our best.
We tried. I'm sorry.
I mean, I think this book is beautifully laid out. I'm going to say that.
Really?
I mean, compared to the one that looked like it was photocopied.
Fuck. Oh yeah. So out of the 5, this is the only one that feels like it's actually, well, Berg is actually laid out too, but the other ones are just offset, like nonsensical as a layout. It's a shame. Like, it really is, like, in being in the trenches, I know how hard it is to redesign books that have existed before, and that it's much easier not to. But wow, have we come a long way in making things readable and, like, in a way, like, making them more aesthetically pleasing to the eye. And that there is, for better or for worse, I think there is a lot to be said about comprehension and memory retention based on the visual and aesthetic layout of, like, a text and the way that you present the words. It's like the old studies that may be invalidated now related to, like, reading books online, and how much you don't remember reading things on a Kindle or on a web page compared to as a printout, which I think was heavily biased towards like exposure problem, where we hadn't had enough time reading on Kindles to develop the necessary memory muscles for that experience. And you could, it'd be easy to be like, oh yeah, you suck at this that you've never done before. You're really bad at it. And that may have changed now, but, like, there is something about, like, the layout of something and the text of something that makes it easy to understand, easier to remember, easier to, like, digest. And I think that some of the ones that End Other Stories reissued that way are really tough. I mean, we did it at Delkey too, but they're tough then and they're tough now. Passages is one that I feel like I never liked because it was so hard for me to physically read. I'm also very old.
Yeah.
I have reading glasses sitting next to me, and I need to put on sometimes to read quotes from our books. Like, there's problems.
All right. Well, let's do some favorite lines. Let's finish off Ann Quin.
You can go, Kaya.
All right. I have two, but I'll do the sweet and short one. Bottom of page 174. I don't think it's fair being woken up at 6 a.m.
I agree.
You don't think it's fair being woken up at 10 in the morning?
I don't think it's fair to be woken up at all. Let it happen naturally.
All right. Mine's very close to that. It's on page 171 from the story, The Unmapped Country. And it just made me think of with how brief and how quick Quin's career was. She thought of Clive's painting, the need for posterity. How much better to create like the Navajo Indians, beginning at sunrise in the desert, a sand painting that would be rubbed out by sundown. Creating just to create, right? Even let the winds of time just take it right away. Who cares? It's not meant to last forever.
I've read so many of the ones that I really like. I'm looking for one other. I mean, if I'm being completely honest, my favorite one is still from BB's the beginning of BB's, where is it? Second Manifesto. Christ, they're so mass consumed they can't even shit straight. I love that line. Anyways, anything you guys want to plug? Talk about? We'll be back in maybe February with the final part of Rodrigo Frazan's part trilogy, which gear up, everyone. We'll put some announcements out there so that everyone has time to catch up by rereading the first two 600-page books before we go into this one. That'll take a while, but I think we really need to close out that chapter of the 2-month review saga. And it'll be fun, and it is funny, and it is different. It's very similar for 2/3 of it, and then it's very different and has like a conclusion that will be satisfying to some and not satisfying to others, and deserves its moment in the sun since it kind of got lost amid everything else that happened within the past few years. In the meantime, you can always support us on Patreon. You can rate us, review us, tell your friends, send emails. If you have comments, if you have suggestions, tweet us. That's all great. I do have one question for you, Brian, that's unrelated, but it's related to plugging things. Are you caught up on Doom Patrol?
No, I'm on season 2, I think.
The new season?
I got a ways to go. Okay.
The new season, probably the last season, maybe one of the best things I've ever seen on TV.
Oh, all right. Well, I gotta finish all of my iCarly, and then as soon as I get through iCarly, I'm sure I'll be able to.
I've already seen all of that iCarly. You needed to have kids earlier.
I don't even know what iCarly is. Just the first thing that came to mind.
We watched so much iCarly and so much Step It Up and so much of Wizards of Waverly Place. All of those things, I'm very, very aware of the weirdness of there.
I have no clue what any of that is, to be honest with you.
Just wait. Isaac's getting there. He's gonna tween it out soon.
Can't wait.
Final words from anyone?
29, 30, 31. 3 more days to do a 12-month subscription through Open Letter Books to get 2 free books included in that subscription. So 12 books.
Take advantage. I've been signing up a lot of people to our subscriptions. Mailed out Pachinko Parlor today. Thank you also to whomever came into our office and cleaned it all. I'm not sure if that's a sign of something or pure disgust or being helpful, but whoever did that, that was very kind of you to put all the boxes in order and throw all the empty ones into my office.
Yeah. Which if it was the fire marshal people, I feel like they solved one problem and created a bigger problem.
No. I burnt those. I lit them on fire. I took care of that problem. It was fine. Just light it.